Welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. If you're tired of censorship, outraged by government abuses, and thirsty for real insights, then you're in the right place. Get ready, because here, the fight for freedom never ends. Here's your host, Professor Nick Giordano.
Welcome, everyone, to the P.A.S. Report podcast. This is your host, Nick Giordano. I'm glad you could join me. Make sure to follow and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Also, visit the P.A.S. Report website, pasreport.com. I have a great guest today. I have Tiffany Justice, co-founder of Moms for Liberty, who is joining me to talk about a government that has really gone off the rails and is out of control. Tiffany, how are you today?
I'm good, and you're not wrong. The American government has lost its way.
Well, it certainly has lost its mind. Last week, I was reading a report that stated that the Department of Justice was tracking your organization alongside the Ku Klux Klan. Can you explain what's going on to the audience?
Yeah, it gets even better than that. So Luke Rosiak is a reporter who works with the Daily Wire. He's also a fellow at the Government Accountability Institute, Peter Schweitzer, and has done a lot of research about unions and school districts and the way they spend their money. He wrote a book called Race to the Bottom, if you haven't read it yet, that really talks about the rot in America's public school system. But Luke found out that we were being tracked. And so he wanted to do some FOIAs of the Department of Justice to see exactly how and why we were being tracked, who else was being tracked. And so he did some public records requests. Well, the DOJ completely ignored these requests. So America First Legal, Stephen Miller and America First Legal, who we love, thank you, America First Legal, sued on behalf of Daily Wire to get these documents. And what we found, what came back was, in fact, the DOJ is tracking Moms for Liberty. They have Google alerts and other things set for us, as well as the KKK, white supremacist organizations, and a number of really horrible words and actions that they're looking for, like noose and lynching and the N-word. How Moms for Liberty is a part of any of that is absolutely ridiculous and nonsense. But thank you, SPLC. That was the point, right, of you designating us an anti-government extremist group so you could sick the American government on us. Thank you for that. But here's the thing. Why were they tracking Moms for Liberty? Well, they have something called a community relations service. And this community relations service was looking for school boards around the country who were implementing conservative policies. So they started tracking Moms for Liberty so that they could see where conservative policies were being proposed or enacted, and then they could go and intimidate the school board members so that they would not implement the policy. So specifically, we're talking about Roanoke County, Virginia. A school board there was going to enact a model policy that Governor Youngkin had brought forward, which was to keep girls safe in bathrooms, to make sure that children didn't need to lie in school about biological truth. And this community relations service came in and offered to mediate in the community because there were tensions around this policy. And the idea that the Department of Justice is intimidating duly elected local officials like a school board to not enact policies that they were actually voted in to enact is absolutely outrageous. The true violation of representative government and certainly parental rights.
Yeah, and I find it really concerning, particularly the Southern Poverty Law Center as being part of this, because let's be honest, because they declared you an anti-government extremist group, that's what probably kicked this off. If you might have been on their radar beforehand, but this solidified it. And the Southern Poverty Law Center, they were also behind the whole traditional Catholic memo, right? The FBI going to churches because they felt that traditional Catholics were the next domestic terrorists. So we're seeing more and more interaction between the Southern Poverty Law Center and the Department of Justice. And it all stems from the June 2021 National Strategy for Countering Domestic Terrorism, because that's what they want to tag Moms for Liberty as, a domestic terrorist organization, essentially. Has your organization subpoenaed to get any communications between the Southern Poverty Law Center and the Department of Justice?
Yes, in fact, the Heritage Foundation has been a wonderful partner in helping us because, let's remember for a second, we're two moms that started an organization in 2021. We started Moms for Liberty with $500 in Tina's back bedroom, and we made some t-shirts. And so the idea of trying to get information from the federal government or suing the federal government was something, 5 years ago, I never would have even thought we would have to do. I would have to do. And so Heritage, Mike Howell, the oversight project at Heritage has been absolutely amazing and has done a number of requests, the White House, the DOJ, the DOE, to see what was the communication like between the Biden administration and the SPLC. We know that the SPLC met with the Biden administration 6 times in advance of us being put on that anti-government extremist hate list. And so obviously there were a lot of communications. They, shocker, have not been forthcoming with that information either, and the Heritage Foundation has sued on our behalf. We've gotten some of those documents back, and we've been labeled as the opposition in some of these documents. The DOJ and the DOE have accepted briefings from the Southern Poverty Law Center about Moms for Liberty and other organizations. And so what we're seeing is a true weaponization of the government against the American people, moms and dads standing up at school board meetings, communities, taxpayers, speaking out about what, let's be honest, is fraud, malpractice and fraud in our public education system, because we have taxpayers spending upwards of $840 billion a year to support public education, and we only have a third of kids reading on grade level in 4th grade. So sounds like fraud to me. They want to silence us because they know that we're powerful, and we're calling out the fraud in our system. And we're calling out the fact that the public education system is being used by the teachers unions and by the Democrats right now, because that's who the teachers unions support. And the Democrats are not speaking up about any of this because they want to make sure that they keep getting that money from the teachers unions, that the teachers unions continue to be the foot soldiers of the progressive far left. And they certainly have shoved all of their woke ideology and critical theory into all of our schools.
They certainly have. At a time when proficiency levels are at all-time lows, students don't know much. 37% of graduating seniors this year can read or write at the college level. You have 60% of college students that are going to have to take remedial courses for information they should have already learned. But I think that the Department of Justice probably picked the wrong fight, and same with the Southern Poverty Law Center, because you do fight back. Now, have you thought about, and I don't know if you have, so correct me if I'm wrong, but have you thought about filing a lawsuit for defamation against the Southern Poverty Law Center?
We continue to explore every avenue to hold the Southern Poverty Law Center accountable. And here's the thing, they didn't grow and get to this amount of power overnight. So it's not going to be an overnight solution that's going to help us to get rid of them. The truth of the matter is that they're a ridiculous organization. They keep millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in Grand Cayman offshore accounts. They siphon money out of corporations, off of the American public. And so I think people are seeing, right, exactly what the Southern Poverty Law Center is about. Once some people would say good organization doing good work in America, trying to make good things happen for American citizens. Truly, it has become a total farce. And I think they do a lot of damage to themselves, honestly. But stay tuned, because we're a strategic bunch, and we're not going to go down without a hell of a fight. So stay tuned.
Yeah, and Ayan Hirsi Ali and Majid Nawaz, they did end up suing the Southern Poverty Law Center. They did win because it was clearly defamation. And let's be honest here, when it comes to Moms for Liberty, it's not like we're talking about conservative indoctrination. We're talking about getting pornographic material out of schools. We're talking about not cramming this gender ideology woke nonsense down students' throats, leave it up to the parents. And we're essentially talking about an American education where students should learn and have an appreciation for the country that they're living in. And it's teaching the totality of American history, both the good and the bad, not simply denigrating our founding and our history. Is that correct?
That's correct. And here's the thing. Parents have the fundamental right to direct the upbringing of their children. That's their education, their medical care, their morality, and their religion. But let's focus on education for a second. When I say parents have the fundamental right to direct the education of their children, that means education freedom. That means that kids aren't locked into failing schools where parents have to be complicit in the harm of their children every day by sending them into an institution that they know is not going to give them the skills that they need to unfold their full potential in life. This has to stop. And so, why are we a threat? Well, because we're saying that parents shouldn't have to send their kids to failing schools, that we're not willing to prop up an institution that is failing the American public. So parents should be empowered to make the best decisions for their kids. And that's what Moms for Liberty is working to make happen.
Yeah, why do you think, the Democrats, they're constantly talking, the far leftists, the unions, they're talking about, helping those underprivileged people. But when you do lock them into the failing schools, where the Baltimore school district, I think only one school can produce proficiency when it comes to mathematics. The other 13 high schools cannot produce a single student that's proficient in mathematics. We see the similar things in Chicago and New York. So we're talking about the most vulnerable communities where the advocacy, get these kids out of their failing schools, would actually do more to benefit them. And then you had the same union, the Randy Weingardens of the world, that kept these kids out of school for 2 years. I mean, don't they realize that Moms for Liberty is an outgrowth of their failures?
No, they don't. They're not very self-aware. You and I met when you came on a panel, a Giving Parents a Voice panel that we did in New York City and in District 2. And what we saw and heard from New York City parents was they're fed up. Only 11% of Black students in New York City in fourth grade are reading on grade level. That is atrocious. I mean, it is outrageous. And parents are screaming out for choice. They are scared about their kids' futures, and they're busy working and trying to put food on the table, which is becoming increasingly more difficult every day with skyrocketing inflation and our economy going into the toilet. And they're concerned, right? And so when I learn facts like 23 of the 25 top schools in New York City are charter schools, then I say, well, it sounds like charter schools are doing a really good job helping students to learn to read, write, and do math. Maybe we should have more charter schools. Oh, but we can't. Why? Because there's a cap on charter schools in New York City. The unions won't allow any more charter schools to be created. And so people are waking up. I really do believe that in Chicago, in New York, what citizens are seeing is the fact that we have illegal immigrants flooding our border, and they're getting everything. They're getting free shelter and free food, and they're using all of the kids' fields and recreation spaces in order to be housed. And Americans are saying, wait a second, what about our kids? What about our families? Why is my kids' high school shutting down and my kids going to virtual learning so that migrants can be housed in our high school? And what did Eric Adams, do you remember what Eric Adams said after they shut down that high school in Brooklyn?
I don't recall what he said, but he didn't care much.
Eric Adams got up at a press conference and he said, schools are a community asset, which what he meant by that was, I'm going to do whatever the hell I want with this school. And he's right. He is. No one's going to be able to stop him. And the schools right now are acting like daycare centers instead of actually teaching kids. They're doing more with values clarification, more affective education than effective education. And the social emotional learning and the woke nonsense needs to stop. But right now we do have, these are government schools. Let's not forget that. And we do have activists within our government school system that are running the system right now. And so American parents need to step up and speak out and say, we've had enough of our kids being put on the back burner.
Yeah, it is a big part of the problem. And I actually wrote a Fox News piece about how 30,000 illegal immigrants were enrolled in the school system because we are a humane nation and we do believe in giving children an education, whether they're here legally or illegally in the United States. But when you introduce 30,000 new students in one school year, many cannot speak English, to the cost of $38,000 per student per year, it's essentially going to affect the education process and the quality of education that doesn't exist in the first place. Now, when it comes to your membership in places like New York City and places like Chicago and Baltimore, have the parents in these communities been receptive to Moms for Liberty?
No, because the media has done a very good job in trying to blacklist us and make us untouchable. They have said that we are racist. They have said that we are bigots. They have said that we are homophobes. They have said, I don't know how many things they've said about us, how many lies that they've, media captured Institution 2, and they're doing the bidding of the teachers unions and the left as well.
And they never provide any examples of these things. I want to make that clear.
No, there's never any example. In fact, I think I saw you talking to someone and you said, just show me. And Charles Love, who was at the town hall, people said to him, oh, you can't go do this town hall. They're racist. They're homophobes. And he said, oh, okay. You show me the evidence. And they said, well, no, it was reported. And he said, well, surely if they are all of these things that you have said that they are, there must be quotes of Tiffany or Tina or members, being racists and being bigots. Like, just, can you show me some of that? And there's nothing. There's nothing from Tina and I in 4 years serving in elected office that was ever racist or homophobic or bigoted in any way. And our members across the country are concerned citizens. The fact that we have illegal immigrants that are in our schools and we say that we're going to give them an education. We're not even doing that. I mean, they're going to school, but they're not learning how to read, write, or do math.
Well, it's actually more dangerous than that, because they're going to be indoctrinated to hate the country that they came to, because they're going to be told how horrible of a country America is, how evil America is, how they're going to face and be racism and discrimination at the hands of their oppressors, who are the American people. So
one of the
it's
things,
worse.
One of the things that we're doing, and North Carolina has their legislative days coming up. So let me just talk about this for a second. We're set up by chapter, it's by county, and every chapter has a chair, a vice chair, a secretary, treasurer, an executive board, and a voting block. And then the chapters come together across the state, and each chapter sends a legislative liaison to a legislative committee. And that committee creates a platform for Moms for Liberty in the state, the things that they would like to see advanced and the things that they're concerned about. In North Carolina, we have legislative days coming up. That's when our members in a given state go and talk to their elected representatives in their state capital. And so one of the things that's on the North Carolina legislative platform that many other legislative committees around the country, they vote on their platform. So this is not top down from Moms for Liberty. This is bottom up. We're real grassroots. But one of the things that they're putting in this platform is they want every student who is graduating from high school to pass a citizenship test, a U.S. citizenship test. And so I know that's right up your alley, and I wanted to share that with you.
It is, because anyone that listens to my podcast knows that when my students get to my class on day one, they're going to get a citizenship exam, and only 6% are going to actually pass that exam. The rest will fail, and that's unacceptable. You can't have a country where the majority of students don't know anything about the country they're in, but more importantly, don't have an appreciation, particularly for the American values of liberty and freedom. Now, you're going into the belly of the beast to hold your annual summit this year at the end of August. We'll have links up at the PAS report on it, so check it out, pasreport.com. You've decided to hold the national summit this year in Washington, D.C. Tell the audience about it.
Yeah, we're very excited about the national summit. It starts on August 29th in Washington, D.C. at the JW Marriott. And it's going to be great. We have a welcome reception on the first night, going to have hopefully a very special guest on the first night, do a little sit down and have a chat. And then we'll have a full day of events with a morning session, a lunch session, and breakouts where we will equip you with the tools and knowledge you need to be an effective advocate. We call it the Joyful Warrior Summit. We had 750 moms and dads and community members from around the country at our summit last year. That was in Philadelphia. And 40 different states were represented. We're hoping to have every state in the nation represented this coming year. But you should go and buy a ticket and come to this summit, because I will tell you, it is uplifting. It is wonderful to be around people who are like-minded, who love our country, who believe that children deserve a real future where we unfold their full potential in our schools, and we safeguard kids from all of this sexualization and toxicity that is being pumped into their lives every single day. So that's August 29th through September 1st. I do want to tell you, on Saturday, we have something very special planned that we're working on. We're part of a coalition putting on something called the March for Kids. And I'll tell you, there has been a march for almost everything under the sun in Washington, D.C. There have been marches about wars. There have been marches about different groups. There have been marches for endangered species. There has never been a march for children. Never. And so it's about time that there's a March for Kids. If anyone watched Dr. Fauci testifying this week in front of Congress, he was asked about 6 feet of distancing and masking for kids. And he admitted this was completely arbitrary. He said it just appeared. Well, here's what I know as a school board member. That appearance, that recommendation by the CDC of 6 feet of distancing and masking was used as a compelling interest in our courts to usurp parental rights. Fundamental parental rights. These are rights the government does not give you and cannot take away, certainly not easily. When our federal court system, when our courts are dealing with parental rights, they need to apply something called strict scrutiny. Beyond a reasonable doubt, they need to be able to prove the highest reasonable doubt. They need to be able to prove that you as a parent should not have parental rights. And so we are going to march on Washington, and we are going to put kids first and say that our children will never shoulder the burden of adult fear and selfishness again, that we will make better decisions for the most important stakeholders who are going to inherit our country in the future.
And that's a great point. I think what you're bringing up is so important. I was incensed throughout the entire coronavirus at what was taking place. Particularly, I have a background in emergency management. I've actually worked on bioterrorism and pandemic plans. And so I know what the response is supposed to look like compared to what it actually looked like. But when we kept kids out of school for 2 years, and those that returned sooner than 2 years were masked up, and you had those, so that caused enormous damage on an entire generation of students that will be here for decades. How frustrated were you watching Lord Fauci testify before the House, basically trying to deflect any type of responsibility whatsoever?
I'm not going to lie. We have a swear jar at Moms for Liberty. Tina really doesn't like swearing, so I try to be really careful. But I was at home in front of my own television, so I'm going to tell you that a few F words were flying. I'm not a big Fauci fan. I do believe that he should be held accountable in some way for the way that he manipulated the American public and lied to us. And I'll just tell you this. I was on school board March 13th. Schools shut down in Florida. And I felt like I had gotten punched in the stomach. And I know Tina had a similar feeling. I think there were citizens in America who, when we saw the restrictions that were happening, the mandates that were being put in place, the lockdowns, we knew that this was wrong, that this was against the very fabric of what it meant to be an American, and our freedoms and liberties were being taken away from us. And it was wrong. And I fought like hell on that school board to get schools reopened. On July 6th, Governor DeSantis came out and said we would be, in fact, reopening schools. I watched as the teachers union sued Governor DeSantis and won. Then we appealed and we won. And we got schools open towards the middle end of August in Florida. And Florida led the nation in helping to say it doesn't have to be like this. Kids are safe in school. We cannot disrupt their entire lives for a virus that the majority of Americans were going to get, and we knew that. So it was incredibly frustrating to watch Anthony Fauci lie. I think it's very sad because I don't think he will be held accountable. So I was holding him accountable personally in my.
Yeah, I think it's disgraceful that he hasn't been held accountable, and other people as well, including Randy Weingarten as well. I think what took place was horrific. I look at the kids, and I'm disappointed in a lot of parents that didn't speak out. They didn't speak up, and they were scared. They were worried about being ostracized and criticized and getting their livelihoods destroyed. But when we look at it, the Faucis of the world, the Randy Weingartens, the Southern Poverty Law, don't they realize that had it not been for the totalitarian response, that Moms for Liberty probably wouldn't have existed in the first place? If you would have just kept schools open and not forcefully tried to indoctrinate them with all this nonsense, there would be no need for a Moms for Liberty.
COVID, as difficult as it was, and I know that it was, I know many people lost loved ones, and it affected our elderly population in a very serious way. So I don't mean to make light of anyone who lost.
Well, I'll just interrupt you for a second. Rule number one of emergency management is that you protect the most vulnerable communities, and in this case, it was the elderly community, and you provide the least disruption to the lives of the people as possible. They did the exact opposite. They didn't protect the vulnerable community, and they provided maximum disruption to everyone's life.
They absolutely did. And if anyone, followed Jay Bhattacharya and Martin Kulldorff and the Great Barrington Declaration, Jeffrey Tucker and the Brownstone Institute, they know that that's exactly what was recommended and what should have happened. I look at what we did in the school districts, and it really horrifies me, because the steps that we took were completely ridiculous. They didn't help to keep kids safe. In fact, if the virus had been something that affected children, the things that we did would have actually made things much, much worse. And so that was very frustrating to me as a school board member. You interrupted me, so then I lost my train of thought.
Well, I want to know, how did you feel when you had government emperors like Cuomo here in New York stating, like telling little kids that they don't want to be responsible for grandma and grandpa dying, basically putting that on the backs of kids, telling them that if their grandparents die, they're the ones that are responsible for their death?
Yeah, it's criminal. Absolutely criminal. When I was watching Dave Smith on Patrick Bet-David's show talk to the other Cuomo, and he called him out and said, yeah, you made fun of ivermectin, and you made fun of Joe Rogan and then showed him the clip, right? This was criminal behavior. The idea this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated, right? Absolutely horrible. So what I was going to say about COVID was this. I know that people lost their lives, and I know that was very difficult, but COVID was a blessing in many, many ways. We make something at Moms for Liberty called COVID Lemonade. Every single day, we take the lemons, the bad parts of COVID, and we thank God that we were given an opportunity to pull back the curtain so that Americans could see what was really happening in our education system. And we've been given a chance to fix it. And so we're going to fight like hell with a smile on our face because our children are watching us, and it is a privilege to fight for America. And we're going to take our country back. I promise you that.
Well, Tiffany, your organization's doing great work. I encourage everyone to follow Moms for Liberty and go to the National Summit. I'll have links up at the P.A.S. report website. You could then go to the Moms for Liberty website and see what the summit's all about and everything. Tiffany, thanks so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you. I hope to see everybody in Washington, D.C. on August 29th. We're going to have so much fun celebrating America.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report. Don't forget to rate, share, and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll never miss an episode. For more exclusive content and updates, visit us at PASreport.com and follow Professor Giordano on all social media platforms at P.A.S. Report.